Welcome along to Point Blank Music School, where today we're joined here in the studio with course developer for the audio mastering course, Doug Shearer. Doug's here today to give us a bit of an insight into the art of mastering and also to talk about the course itself. So first of all, welcome along, Doug. Thanks for coming. And before we get into the course itself, can you give us a bit of background on yourself and how you originally got into music?
Yeah, well, I was doing an engineering degree, actually mechanical engineering, but there was lots of electrical engineering in it, which helped. But to be honest, I was spending most of my time playing in bands and buying music and listening to music. So after I did that degree, I thought, well, I'm going to try and go and be a sound engineer. And I quite liked the idea of mastering. Firstly, because I thought they probably don't do the long hours that recording engineers have to do. And secondly, I love vinyl. And you see the little messages sometimes on run-out grooves of vinyl that the engineer might put a little comment or a joke or something. And I thought, that's quite cool, I'd like to do that. So I came to London and I did a basic engineering course, a 1-year Cities and Guilds sound engineering course. And I couldn't get a job at a mastering place straight away. And so I had 3 years at this real old school film company, kind of dubbing theatre, recording dialogue and kind of Foley footsteps. And then through that, I managed to get a job at this mastering place. They were starting to do some, restore the audio on some film soundtracks. And I think they thought I was going to bring them some work if they took me on, but I didn't. But I did manage to learn about audio restoration and eventually mastering. The interesting thing is, I think with experience, you just get more consistent. Some of my earliest stuff still sounds great. I think you can still hear it. You don't always know what the best thing to do is, but you can always hear when it's great. I think anyone can.
And so to kind of bring us more up to date, can you give us a bit of an insight into the kind of projects you worked on in the studios as an engineer? Not
all of it's kind of hands-on with the artist. A lot of it might be just doing a radio edit of a song. Notably from America, I did a lot of radio edits of American tunes, because the radio have different standards here. They want a different length of edit. So I've worked with people like, The Fall and the Guillemots, Patrick Wolf, in that kind of hands-on way. They come in and they've got good ears, they know what they're doing, and so you're very hands-on with them. It's quite intensive. But at the same time, I did an album for Jamelia, and they just sent the tracks along and let me get on with it. So it varies. And
mastering itself does seem to be a fairly kind of misunderstood art. To kind of clear things up, to clarify for us, can you explain to us exactly what is mastering?
Right. There's misconceptions because I think there's a few jobs, if you like, involved. Like I said, it started out just as a transfer, and there's been more and more intervention over the years, and we say, okay, well, if it's too dull, we make it a bit brighter. And it's tonal adjustments like that, and then people start compressing it more, and that started out again to help the transfer to vinyl. If something's very dynamic, you can help it go to vinyl better by giving it some compression, and it started as being a technical consideration, not a creative one. But then obviously it changes the sound, and it can sound great if it's compressed. So people started doing more and more and more, and the technology has pushed that. And we can do more, we can limit more, and the level goes up and up and up. But basically, it is the last process in the production chain. That's the key thing. After mastering, it's going to go to the shops, to iTunes, to wherever it's going to go. It's finished.
What do you think is the difference between the mixing process and mastering?
One problem is when people are mixing now, they sometimes compare their efforts to the finished mastered CD, and that can cause confusion, I think. I think in mixing, it's all about the balance between the instruments. Get that balance right, and it'll master well, it'll sound great. A good balance is just what you're really after. And then at mastering, you don't have the individual control over all those instruments. You can't just have more guitar or more bass or more vocal. You can only control a frequency range, and all the instruments that have some sound in that frequency range will be affected when you add some or take some away. So you can do a lot. If your vocal is dull and your guitars are dull as well, you can just add that frequency range. They're in a similar kind of range, you can just add some of that frequency and it'll all come to life. Brilliant. The problem is when you've got conflicting problems, if you've got you know, dull guitars and a really bright vocal, you can't really fix either of them, because if you try and make everything brighter, the vocal's just going to get worse, and vice versa. You know, the guitars are going to go. So you haven't got quite as much control, but you're treating the track as a whole. You're treating it as a single piece of music rather than a series of recordings.
And why is the mastering process so important? Why do we need to master our tracks?
I think traditionally the great virtue of mastering was that you would send it to a different engineer and you'd get a fresh pair of ears on it, and that still holds today. There's something to be said for that. If you've spent, you know, a week mastering your track, you've basically lost your focus. You just don't know what it sounds like, and you give it to someone else and they can say, oh, well, it's a bit dull, make it a bit brighter, job done, you know. Nowadays people master their own stuff, and it's kind of alright as well, because what you do have is you have a bit of time to reflect. You might not be kind of going at it all the time, but you can go, okay, let's just live with this for a while, go and make a cup of tea. There's no pressure, you know. We've got to base it in half an hour or an hour to master a track. It's got to sound great.
I guess it's a bit of a difficult one, that, you know, because, you know, how much do you tamper with it? Do you know when you say when, really? Yeah,
because you know, that's what I mean. If you've done like the mixing course, or even if you've just made your own tracks, you'll be familiar with the tools we use in mastering. It's EQs and it's compressors, basically, and they're really simple tools, but it's a more focused way of using them. And the course will help you know when it's best to go for something in mastering and when it's best to just go back to the mix and tweak that.
So if we now move into the mastering course itself, it was originally developed as an online course. It's still there as an online course. But now you're also in the process of developing it for the studios to be taught here in the college. Can you explain to us, you know, your role as a course developer and what that involves?
We made the online course, and I'm just converting that content to the 12-week format for the classroom. And, you know, where we've had a demonstration on the as a video, it's now going to become a demonstration in the classroom. Just stuff like that. We're also adding a few bits and pieces of content. Notably, there's a lot about audio restoration. And
for the course itself, can you give us a bit of an insight into what we can expect from the course and who it's aimed at?
It's a bit academic the first 2 weeks. Then we just dive into practicing. All that technical stuff is kind of background. Yeah, you can hold in the back of your brain while you're working, and it really guides you when you're working and makes you make the right choices. Like say, you know, okay, I can't fix this, go back to the mix or whatever. Then after that, we introduce EQs. We'll have a look at EQs, EQ types, when we use a certain EQ, what we use EQs for. The next week is compressors, go through them in a similar way, quite detailed way. And from the EQ week onwards, we're practicing every week. We're practicing doing some mastering for your assignments and what have you, and you're getting DVRs of feedback on your work. And we begin that process of kind of refocusing the way you work with these tools. Then we go on to limiting and some other more advanced techniques. Pretty much anything I've ever used in mastering is in there. And then in the latter weeks, we just look at making a CD master. The world of downloads is a bit more crazy. There's not really a good standard of audio to work to, so we're still working to the CD standard.
You've also brought along a project with a few examples of mastering, so can we take a look at it? This is
one of the projects we do in the course. What I've done, I've just got a very simple Logic project. So there's nothing terribly complicated about the Logic side of it, or the Ableton or Cubase side of the mastering, because we're dealing with stereo tracks. We've got the track we're working on here, and I've got on a separate track a version of it with just the mix, so we're just listening to the mix as a reference if we need to. And this is a fairly typical chain of plugins we might have. I've actually got a multi-band compressor on this. That's the one thing that's not really typical. I wouldn't always have that. It seated this particular track. just brings things together a bit. But the more typical side would be a couple of EQs. In this case I've got 3. First of all, I've just got a really standard Logic EQ, which is really good for some things. It's just for normal kind of work. It hasn't got really any character. It's quite transparent, quite neutral.
It's going to be a good thing, I guess.
It's just what you want. You just want to just take something out or give a little something. That's fine. You don't want to hear it sometimes. Alongside that, we've got one of Waves' emulations of a Pultec EQ, and this is the opposite. This is a really quite vibey. It's the real life unit is, you know, it's a real Valve, very old, very charismatic kind of unit, and this is a nice emulation of it, and it just seems to add, as well as adding some, you know, top end or bottom end or whatever you're working with, it just seems to add a bit of kind of something nice, and that's we use in mastering. We use a lot of that. We might use a certain thing just to give a certain quality, and it's not all stuff you can put your finger on. And this is the same in the real mastering studio. You just, you know, decide what you're going to use.
It's quite nice, I think.
Yeah.
And as I guess that's your ears again. You know,
yeah.
As an engineer, you're the person who knows what's going to suit this track.
Yeah, we're not just thinking in terms of, you know, a bit more of this frequency, a little less of this frequency. It's not also technical. I mean, at the bottom end, it's got to just sound great. That's the thing. You really, and from that you have to interpret back into frequencies or whatever. So then on the compression side, what have I got? Well, I've got the multi-band compressor. It's a linear phase multi-band compressor. Really nice actually. Really transparent, and it just if the mix is a little bit just all over the place slightly, you know, it can just bring it together and make it sound coherent. But the language we use is kind of a little bit weird and flowery sometimes, but it's quite subtle things we're talking about. Exactly, I know, and it's just got to kind of, you know, sound, yes, you know,
yeah.
that's the
it's
thing.
about feeling, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. And so some of the language is a bit weird. We're using the C1 Wave C1 compressor on this as a de-esser, basically, for the vocal. And then we're using a limiter, brick wall limiter, just to raise the level and make it sound big, lift it into the speakers, and make it sound as big and impressive as we can. So that's after, and then this is before. You see the big level change, it's much louder now. Sometimes we also use you know, another track by another artist as a reference for level. You know, maybe whatever your favourite CD is. You know, there's certain things that technically lots of people use as references. You know, I don't know, Foo Fighters and AC/DC in the rock field. I'm sure there's others in whatever genre you want to choose. And finally, do you have any specific advice for the guys out there, the aspiring producers who are looking to take their sound to that kind of that level of release quality? You know, if you've done mixing, if you've done even recording, you'll be familiar with EQs, you'll be familiar with compressors. That's all you need to know. All you need to do is try and refocus how you're using them, and that's what the course is all about, really. Like I say, if you've done the mixing course, you know, we have a week on EQ and we have a week on compressors, but a lot of that's going to be familiar, and we're just kind of making it crystal clear by doing that study. But we're using simple tools in quite a simple way, but it's, like I say, it's that visualization at the beginning, knowing what you're trying to achieve, and actually using them a lot less of them than you would in a mix. So you can be working in a very subtle manner, but you do lots of little things, and it can really transform the track if you do the right thing, if you're focused.
So that's it here from us at Point Blank Music School. Just enough time to say a big thank you to Doug for coming down.
Pleasure.
Pleasure to have you here. And if you want to check out more information about the audio mastering course, just head over to pointblanklondon.com or pointblankonline.net. We've got courses here at the college beginning on July 9th, and we're enrolling right now. Also, don't forget, if you do want to come and check out the studios for yourself, you can book a place on our tours every Wednesday at 3 PM and Saturday at midday. And that's it here from us, and we'll see you very soon.
At Point Blank Online, you've got two methods of interaction with your tutor. Firstly, you've got the weekly online masterclass, which is in real time. And then also we've got feedback on your assignments, and that's known as DVR. So the online masterclass is a 1-hour session you get with your tutor every week. You can ask questions about the lesson content and get instant feedback, and also demonstrations on the fly from their computer desktop with our streaming technology. DVR stands for Direct Video Response, and the concept is really simple. You upload your Ableton Logic or Cubase project file to your tutor, he downloads it and then pushes record on the screen capturing software and evaluates your work, so basically giving you one-to-one feedback. You see all of the mouse movements and any parameter changes made by your tutor. It's kind of like sitting in the studio over their shoulder watching what they're doing whilst they work. We have found the DVR process has truly revolutionized the way that we teach online, and the results speak for themselves. Book your place on a course now by visiting pointblankonline.net.